When my grandfather was born, his home was lit, not with light bulbs, but with oil lamps. Light bulbs wouldn't be available in most places except for maybe the downtown core, and wouldn't be widely adopted until he was nearly in his 30s. As a young man, he was amazed as the refrigerator changed how his family managed food and how grocers and butchers worked around the world. He was astounded at the idea of a talkie, a movie with sound, and the television was coming out. The theater even had this incredible luxury called an air conditioner that would cool the building, a luxury not available in most homes for decades. Conversely, I'm 33 years old. I was born in a world where there was no commercial internet, a world without Pokemon. I had to learn to navigate with paper maps, and I had to remember the phone number of every person I might need to call. I even had to entertain myself with pogs, little cardboard, I heard a laugh, little cardboard circles that you would hit with other little cardboard circles. And someone laughed because they knew what I was talking about. If you have no idea what I'm talking about, basically anyone under the age of like 26, I highly encourage you to go look this up. Those were dark times indeed. Nowadays, I got a cell phone, and it conveniently navigates for me via GPS, and it can remember every phone number that I have ever dialed in my life. It can even play video games that I used to need a top-of-the-line computer to play. And if you had asked 8-year-old Jeff if there was one thing he wanted, it would have been to take his game consoles on the road. And now I have a phone and a laptop and a Steam Deck that can all do exactly that. Try to imagine how much these technologies have changed our lives in the last 100 years, from my grandfather to me to you guys. In my grandfather's life, technology would have changed his entire life and livelihood almost every decade. This chart shows a dot for every major technology that has come out, that has changed a sector of an industry like office work, created a whole new industry like film, or changed our way of life, like the refrigerator. And what you're seeing is that the pace of these technologies is not just increasing, but it is exploding. Normally, these are handleable changes. These technologies introduce some new convenience, some new form of expression, and some other new cool way of doing things. We become enamored with them, sometimes obsessed with them, and sometimes, even these days, we redefine our lives by them. We do that all the time, in fact. However, what we don't often do very well, or at least doesn't keep pace very well, is how we teach people about these new technologies. Education, in fact, is often very resistant to change. After all, we've been doing this for years. Why change now? If it ain't broke, don't fix it. However, inevitably, school can't keep up. Social changes, societal changes, and economic changes in our society all create skill gaps. After all, why are we teaching people to fix ice boxes if everybody owns a fridge? And so, we end up having to fix school. And this is often a very painful process, and it is filled with complaint, and it is filled with the lamentations of what's being lost. Very famously, the Greeks lamented the invention of writing. They thought it was going to mean we wouldn't have to remember things anymore. Why train students to remember stories if you could just write them down and just look at notes all the time? God, could you imagine if you had to memorize a speech? Nightmare. In the Industrial Revolution, we got even more freaked out because the mass-produced book arrived. And at that point, and this may shock you all, people became worried that kids were going to stop going outside. That's right. Kids were going to stay at home, and they were just going to read all day. And by the laughter, I can tell that this doesn't feel familiar to anybody. But on a completely unrelated note, the computer got people even more freaked out. I distinctly remember just being in math class, and just the calculator had my teachers so freaked out that they thought if we were allowed to have a calculator in the classroom, we would never know how to do math ever again, that it would poison the process. It's crazy, right? All these technologies that you and I couldn't possibly imagine not being a part of school. Writing, reading, the computer. And I teach. I teach at Toronto Metropolitan University and Algonquin College, and I've taught at a bunch of other schools. And at every school I've ever taught at, I've had a student at least every semester, at least one, come to show me some new technology, be it hardware or software, that could completely change what we were doing in the class right then and there. And I teach in really advanced technological programs like esports and video game design, even dabbling a bit in experimental technologies in business and virtual studio production. These are cutting-edge, bleeding-edge technology spaces where that whole line of, if it ain't broke, don't fix it, again, it isn't working anymore. This time, because we have a new culprit, AI. You might have heard of it. Teachers all over the world are very, very stressed out by this technology and the implications it has on the classroom. But, at least to me, many of these issues echo the same complaints and lamentations of old. Because why are so many teachers stressed out? Well, for some, not for everyone, but for some, this process of schooling, of essays and lectures and oratory and classes and everything else has been carefully crafted to be nearly flawless in training everyone into their particular specializations so they can get a job. And if you are allowed to bring AI into the classroom, well, you're going to stop writing essays, and you'll have poisoned the process. And that's just often not how it works. Many schools are very obsessed with that out-of-graduation hiring rate, that act of getting you specialized and getting you ready to go out in the world. But many people might feel that those out-of-graduation hiring rates might not be so accurate these days. And those people might be right. If we break up the Canadian population into different age brackets and look at unemployment, there's an interesting little thing we find. In the bottom right, you see people age 55 and up. And for them, things are awesome right now. Unemployment's actually trended down in the last couple of years. And even for people in my age demographic, 25 to 54, it's not that great, but it probably could be worse given the climate. But then we come to 15 to 24-year-olds. Students and recent graduates, where unemployment is at 14%. And that line looks like it's going up. What changed for them? Technology changed. AI and its power as a conversational aid and concierge threatens to change many industries, just like new technologies of old. These tools are everywhere, providing on-the-fly, comprehensive solutions to many challenges that normally would have required specialized skills. And businesses are all over this. Food service industry workers in Canada are represented in large part by youth. 42% of those workers are youth. And in fast food chains all over the country, they are beginning to roll out AI-powered drive-thrus and in-store kiosks, threatening to wipe out a significant portion of just those jobs. We can understand this a little bit better by looking at another chart from Stats Canada. Brace yourselves. Okay, it's not that bad. It's not that bad. So what this chart is doing is it's breaking up many, many different jobs by degree type. That's what all the color coding is. What it's also doing is breaking it up along two axes. The first is exposure to AI, and the second is degree of complementarity of AI to that job. Really simply, how much AI can help. Great example of that is in doctors' offices and clinics, where they're using AI to vastly accelerate inpatient processing. Across the board, what you're seeing here is that post-secondary degrees, especially graduate degrees, may have a high degree of exposure, yes, but they have an equally high or greater level of complementarity. But high school degrees have high exposure and often have very low complementarity. You can interpret that however you'd like, but the reality is that unless you are doing hard physical labor, you are staring down the barrel of AI in some fashion. And it's only going to get crazier. In a recent interview, Dr. Yuval Harari postulated that we are entering into an unprecedented time, where for the first time in our history, we are going to be unable to confidently tell our students what skills and knowledge that they are going to need to be successful 20 years from now. And I think technology is going to compound that even more. Quantum computing, for example, is very exciting. But what do we think an exponential increase in computing power is going to do to many industries? We as educators are increasingly facing the unknown. Without enough time to wrap our heads around one technology before we're facing a second. And the unknown is scary. The author, Arthur C. Clarke, many, many years ago, wrote an incredible essay called The Hazards of Prophecy, The Failure of Imagination. It's a paper that I think is very relevant these days, but I'd like today to just focus on one of the 3 laws he wrote in it, which is simply, any technology sufficiently advanced is indistinguishable from magic. We are getting perilously close to that line. Technology these days is incredibly complicated. These tools nest within one another and correlate with one another and call one another, and it exists entirely in the cloud without a need for a specific device. To our parents, and especially to our grandparents, just AI and what it is capable of has already become magic. And those who can wield magic are wizards. I believe we are entering into an age of wizards, where the rapid advance of technology will be too fast and too aggressive for many of us to keep up with, and will heavily advantage those who can. Those who can will appear almost miraculous in their capabilities. And all the stuff that we have around us, all of this wonderful technology, will appear no different than our grandparents and their oil lamps in a couple of decades. The best thing that we can do for our students who are struggling to find jobs now, let alone 20 years from now, is to teach more critical thinking skills and more creative approaches. To teach them to approach with an open and flexible perspective the ever-increasingly magical technologies that they will be facing. A great example of this is a class that I teach called Esports and Online Production, where students create an online broadcasting profile. There are no textual assignments. Instead, students use creative and broadcast tools to make a fully monetizable online platform. They can, if they want, use AI. But to have AI create consistent work across the entire course requires a deep and fundamental understanding of the tool. But it's not about AI. It's about using any unique and novel tool to create a unique and interesting experience for the viewer. Ultimately, I believe that school should become a training ground to teach students the adaptability and the flexibility to ride an ever-shifting wave of social change and to deal with the technologies that are only going to accelerate that change. We need to aggressively adopt AI in the classroom, and we should elevate instructors who can find novel ways of engaging with technology. And more than anything, we should teach ethical and considerate use of things like AI, because training students to use these things in recognition of the deep moral issues inherent in the tools will always be better than trying to ban it from the classroom. Like Arthur C. Clarke also said, the only way of discovering the limits of the possible is to step just a little bit into the impossible. I believe that we as teachers need to take a little bit of a leap of faith and try teaching in ways that we might think is impossible, but to do so before we find that we have to fix school again. Because I truly and deeply believe that the magic that the wizards in this audience and beyond are going to get up to are going to absolutely obliterate our idea of what is possible.